In 1921, a Stanford psychologist named Lewis Terman set out to find the next generation of brilliant minds. He tested more than 250,000 schoolchildren across California and selected 1,521 students with IQ scores above 140. He called them the termites and followed their lives for decades. Most of them went on to become dentists, accountants, teachers, or middle managers. One even became a typesetter. Surprisingly, none of them won a Nobel Prize. Meanwhile, two boys who narrowly missed Terman's IQ cutoff later received Nobel Prizes in physics: William Shockley and Luis Walter Alvarez. The children who scored the highest didn't end up defining the century. The ones who almost qualified often made the greater impact. That wasn't an accident. It revealed a pattern. And it's a pattern that many highly intelligent people spend their entire lives refusing to notice. Most people believe a comforting story about intelligence. It goes like this: smart people naturally become successful, and if they don't, it's because the world failed to recognize their talent. The overlooked genius, the misunderstood genius, the brilliant person held back by ordinary people. But the truth is much colder. In many cases, they were held back by themselves. The kind of intelligence that earns praise in childhood, the kind that makes teachers call someone gifted, can become more than a strength. It can become a trap. The mind becomes so good at recognizing solutions that recognizing them begins to feel like actually acting on them. You understand the answer. You imagine the outcome. Your brain experiences a sense of satisfaction, but nothing changes in real life. Psychologist Scott Barry Kaufman, who has spent years studying gifted underachievement, describes this clearly. Knowledge without action becomes a prison built by your own mind. Highly intelligent people often struggle not because they're too smart for the world, but because so much of the work happens inside their thoughts, instead of through real action. What follows are 5 hidden traps that quietly hold many gifted people back. Not the obvious ones, not the typical self-improvement advice. These are the traps that work precisely because the person inside them is intelligent enough not to notice. The first trap is almost invisible, and many gifted children fall into it long before they become adults. Watch a highly intelligent person read a book about productivity. They read quickly, they highlight key ideas, they take notes. By the time they finish, they have a clear picture of how they're going to improve their life. The plan feels complete. Everything makes sense. They leave the book feeling motivated and prepared. 3 months later, nothing has changed. This isn't simple laziness. It isn't just a lack of discipline. Something much more subtle is happening. Their brain rewarded them for understanding the system almost as strongly as if they had actually used it. There's real science behind this. Neuroscientist Wolfram Schultz spent years studying how dopamine works in the brain. His research showed that dopamine doesn't simply reward achievement. It becomes active when your brain predicts that a reward is coming. The strongest feeling often arrives during the moment of recognition, not after the work is finished. Highly intelligent people live in that moment again and again. They instantly recognize what they need to do. They know the path toward better health. They understand how to improve their finances. They can clearly see how to master a skill or build stronger relationships. Because their minds process information so quickly, that feeling of progress arrives almost immediately. Their brain experiences satisfaction before any real action happens. That's why the most insightful person in a group isn't always the one making the most progress. They constantly receive an internal reward simply for understanding. Understanding begins to feel almost identical to accomplishment. Many people don't experience this in the same way. They only feel satisfied after taking action, so they naturally move forward. The gifted mind, however, can sometimes experience the emotional reward without completing the work itself. A shelf full of unfinished self-improvement books often reflects this pattern. Each book provided a temporary feeling of growth, Attention was exchanged for the feeling of becoming wiser. The emotional reward arrived before real application ever began. That is the first trap. Once you recognize it, you'll begin noticing it everywhere. In your friends, in successful people, in people you admire, and if you're honest, sometimes in yourself. But this trap only works when someone already believes they are different from everyone else. That belief usually begins very early in life. In 1998, psychologist Dweck conducted an experiment that changed how many experts think about motivation. She gave fifth-grade students a series of puzzles. Afterward, half of the children were praised for being smart. The other half were praised for working hard. Then, every child was offered a choice: an easy puzzle or a much harder one. The children praised for intelligence mostly chose the easier challenge. The children praised for effort usually selected the harder one. Dweck repeated versions of this experiment many times. The results remained remarkably consistent. Praising children for being intelligent often encouraged them to protect that identity. Praising effort encouraged them to keep growing. Once someone begins believing, "I'm the smart one," every difficult challenge becomes more than just a problem. It becomes a test of who they are. Failure no longer feels like missing an answer. It feels like losing part of their identity. This is the hidden cost of constant praise. The very words meant to encourage a gifted child can slowly make growth feel dangerous. By adulthood, many highly intelligent people build their entire identity around always appearing capable. Anything that could expose weakness becomes something to avoid. Instead of exploring new challenges, they move toward situations where success feels almost guaranteed. They become experts in areas where intelligence alone is enough to stand out. At the same time, they quietly avoid fields that demand long periods of struggle, practice, and visible mistakes. This is one reason many people with exceptional IQs end up in careers that don't truly match their deepest ambitions. They dreamed of writing an unforgettable novel. Instead, they became consultants who advise writers. They dreamed of building a groundbreaking company. Instead, they spent years helping other founders improve theirs. They imagined a remarkable life. Instead, they created a comfortable life that protected their identity from failure. Mathematician Paul Halmos once suggested that the difference between a great mathematician and an average one isn't intelligence alone. It's the willingness to spend long periods feeling confused. Average performers prefer problems they already know how to solve. The greatest performers stay with uncertainty for days, weeks, or even months. They accept looking inexperienced while learning. Many gifted adults struggle with this. Looking unprepared feels too risky, so they create a small world filled with predictable victories. Eventually, that world begins to feel too small. Instead of taking realistic steps forward, they often reach for enormous dreams that remain safely out of reach. This becomes the next trap. Many gifted underachievers live between two extremes. They either do things they already know they'll do well, or they dream about achievements so massive that they never actually begin. There is very little middle ground. Most people understand that progress happens gradually. They try new things. They improve step by step. They accept being average before becoming skilled. That ordinary middle stage is where most meaningful success is built. But for someone whose identity depends on always appearing talented, the middle feels uncomfortable. Because in the middle, performance becomes visible. Results become measurable. Reality replaces potential. The belief of "I'm naturally gifted" must finally face evidence. To avoid that discomfort, many choose familiar tasks where success is almost guaranteed. At the same time, they imagine future accomplishments so extraordinary that no one can question them. One day they'll write an unforgettable book. One day they'll build a company that changes an industry. One day they'll create work remembered for generations, as long as they never begin. Those dreams remain perfect. No one can prove them wrong. Potential stays untouched, but real progress never starts. The actual book isn't written. The actual business isn't launched. The actual skill isn't developed. Because all of those require spending a long time being average before becoming excellent, and that is exactly what their identity struggles to accept. Author David Epstein discusses a similar idea in his book Range. He explains that people who delay trying difficult things often become worse at judging what they're truly suited for. Instead of learning through experience, they make life decisions based on imagination. Fantasy slowly replaces reality. Over time, an even deeper version of this trap can appear. The gifted person begins comparing themselves to people who actually took action. A colleague publishes an imperfect book. Someone else launches a business that struggles at first. Another person releases creative work that receives mixed reviews. The gifted observer quietly tells themselves, "I could have done better." Maybe they're right, maybe they aren't, but because they never entered the arena, no one will ever know. Their potential remains untouched. Untested potential begins feeling more valuable than imperfect achievement. In their own mind, staying capable of greatness becomes more satisfying than creating something real. That is one of the cruelest illusions. It allows someone to lose years while still feeling superior. The other person produced something imperfect. The gifted dreamer still believes they'll create something extraordinary someday, when the timing is right, when inspiration arrives, when everything finally aligns. But that perfect moment rarely comes. The real obstacle isn't inspiration. It's accepting the long period of ordinary work required before remarkable results appear. Many gifted adults simply cannot accept being ordinary in public, so they wait. And while they wait, years quietly disappear. Their lives become filled with explanations instead of accomplishments. Here's another fact that's often misunderstood. A high IQ doesn't mean every part of the brain performs at the same level. IQ mainly reflects abilities like reasoning, memory, language, and recognizing patterns. But another system controls something equally important: execution, planning, organization, following through, turning ideas into action. These abilities depend heavily on the brain's executive functions, especially within the prefrontal cortex. Clinical psychologist Peg Dawson has spent decades working with gifted adults. She describes a pattern known as asynchronous development. Simply put, the thinking part of the brain matures faster than the part responsible for managing action. A child may develop advanced reasoning years before developing strong planning skills. Their mind races ahead. Their ability to organize life does not. Researchers studying gifted children have observed similar patterns. Advanced cognitive abilities often appear long before executive skills fully mature. The engine becomes powerful, but the driver is still learning. Sometimes the gap remains well into adulthood. That's why someone may deeply understand money management, yet still struggle to pay bills on time. They understand healthy habits, yet fail to maintain them. They know exactly what should be done, but repeatedly postpone doing it. This isn't simply a contradiction. It's a difference between knowing and consistently acting. As children, gifted students often compensate with raw intelligence. School rewards quick thinking. Deadlines are flexible. Last-minute effort is often enough. They never need to build strong systems because intelligence keeps rescuing them. Then adulthood arrives. Suddenly, execution matters more than potential. Ideas become common. Reliable action becomes valuable. And the strategy that worked throughout childhood no longer works. For many gifted adults, this is the turning point. Their intelligence isn't the real problem. The real challenge is that their environment never forced them to build strong habits, consistent routines, or reliable systems of execution. Their natural ability covered those weaknesses for years. By the time they notice the gap, it has become part of their daily life. Thinking harder doesn't solve it. In fact, it often makes the problem worse. The more they analyze, the more they feel as if progress has already been made. Meanwhile, very little changes in reality. Another hidden trap is quiet but powerful: contempt for ordinary methods. Listen carefully when a gifted person hears about someone else's success. They hear stories about years of practice, consistent effort, building relationships, showing up every day, and slowly improving. Sometimes their first thought is, anyone could do that. They believe real success should come from brilliance alone. Networking feels unnecessary. Marketing feels beneath them. Consistency seems boring. But almost every meaningful achievement is built through those ordinary actions. Research repeatedly shows that long-term success depends less on raw talent and more on steady execution. Talent is valuable, but unused talent creates nothing. Many gifted adults struggle because becoming a beginner again feels uncomfortable. They would rather protect the image of being naturally talented than risk looking inexperienced. Unfortunately, avoiding that discomfort often means never building the life they imagined. In the end, intelligence alone is never enough. Knowledge without action remains only potential. The people who build meaningful lives aren't always the smartest. They're the ones who keep showing up, learning, improving, and taking action even when progress feels slow. If you recognized yourself in any of these 5 traps, don't see it as a reason to give up. See it as a chance to change. Stop waiting for the perfect moment. Stop protecting the image of being naturally gifted. Start building, even if your first attempts are ordinary. Because extraordinary results are almost always built on ordinary actions repeated over time. Your future won't be defined by how much you know. It will be defined by what you consistently do. And remember, the greatest tragedy isn't having less talent. It's having great potential that never becomes reality. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our upcoming videos. Also, share your thoughts in the comments below. Which of these 5 traps do you think affects people the most? And have you ever experienced one yourself?